and our meeting tonight is now open for sharing testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Day from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm thankful to be learning through Christian Science in this church that I don't have to be mesmerized or hypnotized by what I see in front of me. A family member of mine recently fell and hurt her mouth. She called me for help, and when I saw her, I immediately began calling on God mentally, repeating, "God is here." By doing so, I was trying to make sure that my thought remained lifted so that I couldn't be pulled down to focus on what I was seeing. Although I felt an aggressive suggestion to be worried and afraid, I was able to remain calm in order to help and comfort her. Due to the bleeding she was having, I was moving quickly to assist her while asking God for direction all along the way. At some point, I felt the need to go to the emergency room, so I was quickly redirected to help clean the wounded area first. After doing so, she expressed that she was no longer in pain, so she wanted to rest. She went to bed right away and woke up feeling joyful and energized the next morning. A few days later, she went to the dentist to have her teeth checked and received wonderful results back from her exam. I'm so grateful that I'm learning in Christian Science, that I have the opportunity and the right to remain focused on God no matter what is presented in front of me. And I'm thankful for the positive results that I have seen for myself by doing so. Thank you so much for tonight's reading and for all the testimonies that will be given. I'm very grateful to be a part of this church, and I'm grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Good evening. Recently, I noted a blood stain on my pillowcase. I discovered the wound on the left lobe ear, on the lobe of the left ear. I mentioned this to my practitioner, and that was the end of the stain. I am most grateful for this rapid display of the healing power of truth through Christian Science. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne from Florida, go ahead.
Thank you for those beautiful and timely readings tonight. Several years ago, I was faced with a very frightening situation and asked a practitioner here to pray for me. The day of this event, I awoke very early in the morning and remember sitting at my dining room table, very afraid of what was to happen. I sat there praying and also remembering that the practitioner was praying for me. And very soon, I felt such a sense of peace and God's powerful love come over me. It was like nothing I had ever felt before. Really like legions of angels were surrounding me. Thanks to the practitioner's prayers, I was able to face that situation and came through it wonderfully. In fact, to many it seemed almost miraculous. I'm so grateful to have learned here that God is a very present help in trouble. I'm grateful for all the practitioner help that I've received along the way, and I'm grateful to be here tonight amidst all this love. Thank you.
Thank you. Dale from Virginia, go ahead.
Thank you for those very wonderful readings tonight. I love this week's Daily Watch. It likens our work to making a bed quilt. I'll read a little bit of that. Quote, after you have made one individual perfect square, or have seen yourself as God's perfect four-square man, you must extend this recognition to all mankind until you see them all perfect, bound together as one great family of God's perfect ideas. When you see all of God's children linked together in one harmonious spiritual family, This causes your consciousness to act like a spiritual comforter, which you can throw upon mortals, and with which you can heal them with the warmth of divine love. End quote. I experienced this divine love some years ago when on vacation, one evening, I suddenly found myself in extreme pain. My husband and I took up my books, the Bible, and Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, and prayed to see through this lie. After a period of time without progress, my husband mentioned calling for an ambulance, but I said no. Please call a Plainfield Christian Science practitioner, something I had hesitated to do because of the time difference where we were. The call was made and help was given, and we were asked to call back in 20 minutes. I called back, said I was a little better, but needed some more help. As soon as I hung up the phone, the pain was completely gone. And not only that, but as was described in the watch, I felt the most comforting love and warmth, something I had never experienced before. I lay down on the bed, went immediately to sleep, and after a beautiful night's sleep, felt perfectly fine and was eager to catch our flight for our trip home. I can't express enough gratitude for the dedication of the practitioners in this independent Plainfield Church, who live and act in the love of God, faithful to Mary Baker Eddy's revelation of divine science, following in the footsteps of Christ Jesus. And I'm very grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Pam from Virginia, go ahead.
Yes. I would like to tell of a healing I had a number of years ago prior to my being married. I was living in Arizona at the time. This healing proved to me just how close God is when you draw nigh to Him. At that time, I found myself working almost daily with the lesson sermon and an article written by an early worker of Mrs. Eddy's. His name was Adam Dickey, and the article was entitled God's Law of Adjustment. That morning, I had just finished my quiet and prayerful work, as I did every morning, and had started getting ready to go to work. As I was going out the door, I looked for my car keys and could not find them anywhere, and finally had decided that I would need to ask a neighbor who lived below me if he could take me to my office. Just as I headed out the door, a very loud voice, not a human voice, told me very specifically with directions what and where I needed to go to find my keys. I was obedient, and there were my keys. I was so excited and happy over this incredible occurrence that I jumped up in the air and said, "Father, this is the way it's supposed to be all the time, isn't it?" I will never forget that strong proof to me that God is always near to help us, but we have to be near Him. He must be the number one priority in our lives. We cannot allow ourselves to get caught up in the material picture with its mundane chores and put God on the back burner, so to speak. He has to come first, and the joy that comes from doing this is priceless. I had another incident occur soon after that in which an angel message came to me to help someone traveling. I did not know personally anyone on a trip at that time, but got busy immediately with my prayerful, protective work. It is so uplifting to work in the spiritual realm. Nothing on this earth can give you this type of happiness and joy, which comes to you when doing God's work. I am so grateful and proud to be a part of this incredible church that is reaching out to the world with Mrs. Eddy's pure teachings of Christian Science. It means so much to me to be a member, and especially at this time with so much dissension in our country. There is such a wonderful unity and love in this church, And it makes you stronger in the work that you must do when you know that each of us in this church are working for the same cause, to see the allness and power of God and the destruction of error that is trying to destroy our country and undermine the whole world. What a privilege to be a part of this God-directed cause. Thank you, Gary, for your powerful readings and for all the testimonies we will have this evening. I am so very glad to be here. Good evening.
Thank you. Dave from Florida, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Years ago, I was walking on a golf course and stepped into a small hole that was hidden because it was grown in with grass. I twisted my knee very badly. The next day, it was so painful I could hardly walk. I called the practitioner and asked for help. One of the many thoughts I was given to work with was from Science and Health, page 424. Accidents are unknown to God or immortal mind. It goes on to say, under divine providence, there can be no accidents, since there is no room for imperfection in perfection. On the next page, it says, correct material belief by spiritual understanding, and spirit will form you anew. I made sure I was doing that every time I thought about what had happened. And I also, of course, stayed in touch with the practitioner. Within a week or so, I was entirely fine, and the knee has been perfect ever since. I'm grateful for Christian Science, to be a member of this church, to the healing practitioners, and to know that prayer is the solution for all that is going on in our country and the world. And thank you for those readings. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I'm very grateful for all I am learning by being a member of this church. I have learned here in Plainfield that we aren't supposed to entertain error, enter into a conversation with it, or consent in any way to believe in a power apart from God. These concepts as a whole are ones I have only encountered in this church. My entire life before coming here, I thought those erroneous thoughts were mine and were me. And because of that, I allowed them to form how I self-identified. Because I accepted them, my thought became continually depressed. After being brought here and taking the time to study Christian Science and work with a practitioner from this church, it has become clearer and clearer why believing in a power apart from God is so down-pulling. Since God is truth, life, love, mind, and all good, my giving power to a mistaken view of myself and creation has led me to think falsely, to fear death, to be hateful, to be foolish, and to be useless. All that came from my constantly saying yes when I should have been saying no. Learning here to say, as Christ Jesus did, "Get thee behind me," has over time changed my thought from a garbage dump to one that can more and more accurately reflect what God is and what He's telling me to do. Recently, I was able to talk to my daughter for a while, and she mentioned that she has been realizing the need to set boundaries in her life so she doesn't accept unhealthy behavior from other people. Because of what I've learned here, I was able to add that she needed to make sure that all of her self-talk was good and true and loving, and that she needed to stand guard mentally at least as much as she might physically and in her relationships. I told her that it was my accepting small lies along the way that eventually led to my believing that the world would be better without me. All of that happened in my thought. I let her know that it has been through this church that I've learned the need to stand guard mentally, and what a huge positive change that has made in me. I'm grateful that she was glad to hear it, and she said she would work with that. I'm very grateful for Christian Science, for practitioner support, and for God giving me the words to share what I have learned with my daughter. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you very much for the readings tonight and for the beautiful prelude. Tonight, I'm very grateful for the prayer watches led by this church. It has been a blessing in my life in countless ways. This last weekend, a couple of marches were organized in Plainfield. One was very close to the church where we were holding our Bible study. The march did not disrupt the class nor our needed work activities afterward. It was peaceful and quiet, thanks to the love-filled, consecrated prayers for the community and world at this church. This experience also brought a healing for me regarding unhealed past fears and memories from childhood, having grown up in the 60s and 70s in an area where many violent radical groups were active, and some of them that was their headquarters. During this time in working with a practitioner leading up to these marches, she gave me many instructions on praying for these situations. It kept my thought focused on God, not on people, events, or past memories. It was such a power and joy to witness the effects of this church's prayer. And I know very much that this was not a coincidence, that this was peaceful, because I know that some of the situations that were trying to present themselves and the people involved could have led to a different situation. And to me, it's just the same as we've seen with the storms. They were stilled, and there was protection, and not only that, but there was good and peace out of it. And I know that what it did was brought out the good that was already here. And I'm so grateful to have witnessed that. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Bruce. I'd like to share an experience I just had a few days ago where God took very good care of me and showed me how much His love is ever present. I was going down the highway, quite a ways from home actually, and then I saw on the dashboard an indication that's saying one of my tires was going flat. And I was calculating in my mind, where am I going to stop and get off? I wonder if I can make it all the way. And as I thought that, the number of pounds in my tire went down by 1. I says, I'm getting off right here. It was like God sent me that clear message. So I got off on the next exit. I had no idea where to go because I was totally unfamiliar with that area. But I pulled into the nearest gas station and actually asked one of the customers that was filling his car with gas there where I can get some help with my tire. And he said, sure, it's just only like 200 or 300 yards down the road on the left. Go on down there. Well, I went down there, and I got to tell you, that place looked rough. But I pulled in. I stepped out, and everybody was looking at me when nobody was saying a thing. All right, so I went into the office. The guy behind the desk looked at me and says, yeah. So I said, can you guys help me with my tire? He said, go talk to that guy that's working on the pickup truck out there. I went out there. As it ended up, he was the most polite and helpful guy you could ever imagine. So that first impression of this business that looked pretty rough, it was nothing more than an outward appearance. You know, you can't judge things by the outward appearance. But the guy took my truck, put on my spare tire, actually. That was the best he could do for me, but thank God he could do that. It got me back on the road. And it ended up being a very pleasant experience. And then later on, and I turned on the computer and looked at our website and read this article by Blanche Hersey Hogue, His Angel. There's this one sentence in there where it reads, when the promise reads to the student that God will send a pure and perfect spiritual intuition to keep him in the way and to bring him into the place which God has prepared. It made me so much more grateful to God for this experience because He obviously led me to the place where I needed to go despite not knowing anything about the area. God took care of me, so I'm just so thankful for Him and His angels, whoever they may be. Every one of His angels are wonderful, good things. So I'm very thankful for this. Craig.
I'd first like to thank the beautiful music and also Gary for the wonderful readings that both gave me some joy and it was very uplifting. Recently I had a healing of being lifted out of a sense of gloom. And it's sneaky because I didn't really realize that I was feeling kind of gloomy, but I really was feeling insecure about about the future, about what I should be doing or whether I'm doing what I should be doing. And I started reading Watches, Prayers, and Arguments and happened upon an argument for happiness. Well, whenever you're not feeling quite right, definitely not God talking. And Mrs. Eddy says, I am an unresisting channel through which love shines with its full healing force. But I needed to get out of myself and realize God is going to be using me today, the next day, and let's just deal with that. By the time I finished, and it said, it includes more than I can possibly now discern or desire in the measure of happiness, and the completion of every prayer or wish that's wholesome and right for me to have. I just felt so good and happy. And I didn't have to worry about the future because all I had to do was what I had to do today. God already knew what was wholesome and right for me to have. So there's no such thing as being worried or gloomy or about the future for anybody. And then it meant that was true about each and every one. All they had to do was argue for it and realize that God loves them, is with them, and is planned the next step for each one. And we're all His. He's impartial. So I just was so glad again that I was woken up by Mary Baker Eddy to the wonderful truth that's everybody's, this healing church.
Thank you. Luba from Ohio, go ahead.
I am so grateful for God's protection through the years. Many years ago, I was driving and came to a light. When the light changed, something very strongly told me to wait, and within moments, a car raced past me, and had I gone forward, I would have been hit from the driver's side. In recent years, I had similar experiences. About a year ago, this literally hit close to home. I was in my kitchen when a truck crashed into my house, and I was only a few feet away from the vehicle. I was shaken but not hurt. My gratitude to God was and is infinite for His ongoing protection. I'm so grateful for this. Thank you for tonight's reading, and I am grateful to be here also.
Thank you. Betty from California, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. And I'm so grateful for those readings tonight. I love that story about Peter going to see Cornelius and God telling him not to call anyone unclean or common. I'd like to express gratitude for the calendar statement from our church calendar. It is a joy each day to see what that day's message is going to be. Yesterday's message for June 9th was, quote, "When self is silent and opinion still, a gentle voice reveals the Father's will," by Max Dunaway. This was a great reminder to quiet my thoughts when listening for God's direction and to be less fond of my own opinion and other selfish thoughts. This helps me to be quiet and clear, to quiet and clear the way to hear God's gentle voice. It also helps me to hear what others are saying as well. Very grateful to be a member of this church where Mrs. Eddy's pure Christian Science is taught and practiced. And I'm very happy to be here tonight.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary, for the beautiful, loving readings tonight. In your readings, you cited Acts 10:15, where it says, what God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. I'm so grateful that through Christian Science, I'm finding very deeply that since all creation in truth reflect God, only seeing correctly what God has created in each of his ideas proves our love for him and for our fellow man, and that this correct view remains what can bless all with the lasting peace that only our Father, Mother God can give. I'm grateful for that. I have 2 testimonies, one from Germany. It reads thus: today I would like to give a testimony about an experience that had at a time I was doubting if my prayers are helpful. When my brother was born, the medical standpoint was that he has the Down syndrome. He lives in a home with handicapped grown-ups. Some time ago, he invited my son and myself for his birthday. The day before, I prepared myself and prayed and studied that I would not see limitation and sickness the next day. We went there and had a wonderful time with his whole group, about 10 residents and 2 caregivers. During the coffee cake time, we all sat together at a big round table besides one man. He sat aside alone and did not look to the others, and he did not speak any words. During that afternoon, I often corrected my thought and declared the truth to myself about what I saw. After the coffee, we went around the corridors looking at the paintings and photographs, so on. This man passed by and my eyes met his eyes, and immediately I corrected my thinking and told myself that he is God's perfect child. Later, we all met in the front of the house in order to go for a walk together, and I sat on a bench waiting for the others, and that man sat beside me. He kept his ears shut with his hands, and his upper body was shaking back and forth. As I realized this, I started to pray like that he is God's wonderful spiritual child, and that I know it, and he is made perfect, whole, and loved by God. When all members arrived, we started to walk, and suddenly this man came to me. He took my hand in both of his hands, looked into my eyes, and said, "Thank you." And then he turned around and was quiet again. This was a wonderful experience for me. Tears came to my eyes. I do not know what happened with him, but this was an answer for the doubts I had the days before. I am very grateful for Christian Science and that God loves us all. And this one from North Carolina. It says, last spring, as I was headed to England and Europe for work, I suddenly found myself struggling with a variety of physical issues. I remembered the previous healing of a severely sprained ankle that was healed instantaneously when it became clear to me that God was the source of all movement. As I reclaimed that truth, all pain and limitation cleared up. I was so grateful. So I was surprised to see that the congestion in my head seemed to still be lingering. The day I was supposed to fly, I called the Plainfield practitioner who lovingly spoke with me about my motivation for the trip and how that was all rooted and grounded in love. And then she said, "Wherever you go, divine love has always been there before you." That was the first time I had ever heard that said in quite that way, and it really struck me. So I held to that. Both of my flights went really well. The time on the ground, however, seemed a bit more challenging. When I made it through customs in England in the early morning, I was supposed to rent a car and drive for about an hour and a half to my destination. I got to the rental car area, and when I went to claim my reservation, I found I didn't have my driver's license, which made it impossible to rent a car. I didn't know what to do, and so I kept clinging to the idea that divine love had already been in this car rental place before me. Still holding to the truth, a lovely young man saw my dilemma, and his suggestions led me to a manager who was able to help me rent a car. I was overjoyed. I then drove an hour and a half through the most beautiful spring countryside with baby lambs on bright green hills to a lovely hotel where I was to stay for work. When I went in to check in, they told me my room wouldn't be ready until the afternoon. I was tempted to feel disheartened, but how could I be when so much good had already happened? So I found a quiet place, ate something, dozed, and prayed until my room was ready. The next day, after a good night's sleep, I felt better and went out for a walk, but I was still feeling impressed by some symptoms. When I spoke with the practitioner, the fact that she was so unimpressed by anything made me realize that I had been duped into thinking something else had to heal. I had a quiet rest of the day, holding to divine love. The rest of the trip was glorious, and any obstacles like flight delays, bad weather, difficult interpersonal interactions, a complete transit shutdown of an entire country on a travel day couldn't impress me. Everything sorted itself out harmoniously. Even holding to the truth, even what would otherwise have been an extreme financial disaster worked out harmoniously. Since that trip, this truth that divine love has always been here before us has become a touchstone, not just in my travels, but during these times of great transformation for our world. Whatever appears to be happening all around us, divine love has always been here before us. And as Mrs. Eddy says, divine love always has met and always will meet every human need, guaranteed. I am so grateful for the loving practitioner support, the dedicated membership, and the practical Christian science being taught here that meets every need.
Thank you. Mary.
Okay, we have a few things to read tonight. The first, Pennsylvania. This is from our website bulletin board. The best part of Sunday's service for me was a testimony by A.H.W. DeLand, Florida, from Miscellaneous Writings. It described a very young child's responsiveness to science and health being read aloud. Very cleansing and uplifting. Thank you for including it in the service. And then Illinois. The following is found in No and Yes, Science of Mind Healing by Mary Baker Eddy. We can rejoice that every germ of goodness will at last struggle into freedom and greatness, and every sin will so punish itself that it will bow down to the commandments of Christ, truth, and love. What a wonderful outlook on the germ of goodness instead of the germs of mortal mind. And California. I listened many times today to the round table from January 21st, 2018. Being new to Plainfield, this roundtable was so very much just perfect for me today. The Plainfield Bounty is like the pirate's treasure place. Only the goods are not stolen. They are shared in love. Thank you again and again, and for your work and understanding and love. And then Florida, I just finished reading cover to cover the May Love is the Liberator magazine. Thank you to all who contributed. It was like an afternoon communing with God. Each article, testimony, and letter of gratitude blessed me and filled me with such a peaceful joy. And thank you, Luanne, for your beautiful soul-filled painting. Such a perfect ending to this visit with God. And this is England. Just a line of thanks for the excellent roundtable session last Sunday. I am so grateful for these and also the Bible studies, which bring out so many new thoughts and explanations. Thank you also for the new Love is the Liberator, which is very interesting. I enjoyed learning about your Civil War, as it is not something we studied at school. I appreciate the work which must have gone into preparing it. I must admit I had a chuckle at Stonewall Jackson only fighting, quote, ordinary battles, end quote, on Sundays. I'd also like to express my gratitude for continuing practitioner support, which recently helped me overcome a problem one night, which occurs occasionally and has previously given hours of intense pain. I am very grateful to have had a much more comfortable night, as is right for God's child. I'm so grateful for the Plainfield Church Independent. California, I have started keeping a Word document journal, my gratitude journal. I have heard testimonies at the Plainfield Church about keeping such a record. It represents a wonderful moment to record God's blessings during the day, realizing the statement, quote, "This is God's day. All of the events of this day are in God's hand. He is my loving Father and gives me only good. I believe this with all my heart." End quote. And that was from Mrs. Evans. There is always something to place in it. A CD Christian Science article I listened to recently mentioned that. And this is a quote, "It was not the size of the thing done that was important, but the spirit in which it was done." And then she gives a testimony about how she was able to express love and kindness. People were waiting in line to get into the bank, and it was a great healing and to others. And she ends with, "I love this church, its practitioners, the science of Christianity as revealed to our leader, Mary Baker Eddy, to Jesus Christ, our teacher and example, and to God, our ever-present Father, Mother." New Jersey, I once again want to thank you for maintaining the audio version of the lesson. I download it weekly and listen to it daily. I also read the lesson online. Thank you for these resources. And someone new in California, thank you for all the work you put into your beautiful website. It has become a big part of my life and has helped me to become a better mom, sister, wife, worker, and I mean worker, as in follower of Christ. Beautiful work. Thank you. And then this, lastly, was a comment left on the Sunday, June 7th roundtable discussion. The theme of it was how to soften a hardened heart. This person writes, 3 times I have listened to this today, and I am profoundly affected by all the clarity, the true care, and concern for all mankind. I can feel the sincerity. I needed to know that those behind Science and Health were inclusive of every race. My suspicion was like a block-hardened rock because of all that is reported by news outlets had robbed me, and I was deeply hurt. Those of a darker color have been shot like nothing for so long. Those pictures of the Negro hanging from trees and being thrown to the alligator were burned into my mind. The depth of such cruel hatred, and I wondered why. Police pushing young Negro men into police cars already convicted through trials that had not even happened yet. Those whose fathers and mothers were killed falsely imprisoned and left homeless, drugged out because they had lost all hope, as jobs were faded out or given to others through nepotism. The family farm homes schemed away from them, and then they finally turned to crime. They set terrible examples sometimes by being misled, as they felt even God had forsaken them. Divine love is the only answer to all the problems affecting us, and not fear or power through force, but humbled, everlasting divine love, relieved and healed of a hardened heart by Christian Science today. Mrs. Eddy did us all good by her steadfast efforts